Her mother, Rosanna, was very concerned about her daughter's long absence, as this behavior was unusual for Vanessa, so Rosanna went to the police for help. This case attracted a lot of national media attention, as this kind of incident had not happened in the small town of Princeton for the past 30 years. In addition, just a few days before, another runner and fitness blogger, Karina Vetrano, 30 years old, was involved in a similar incident in a New York City neighborhood. Vanessa Teresa Marcotte was born on June 17, 1989, in Leominster, Massachusetts. She excelled in and graduated summa cum laude from Boston University in 2011 with a bachelor's degree in communications. After graduation, she worked at an online marketing software in Boston called WordStream. Later, she became an account manager in Google's New York City office. About once every 2 months, Vanessa had the opportunity to visit her mother and aunt who lived in another state, in the small rural town of Princeton, with a population of about 4,000. She was an only child in the family, so her mother Rosanna looked forward to every meeting and was happy when her daughter found an opportunity to visit her. On Sunday, August 7, 2016, at about 1 p.m., Vanessa left her mother's house on Brook Station Road to go for a run and then take the commuter bus back to New York later that day. The area she was going to run in was familiar to her. After several hours passed and Vanessa did not return, her mother contacted the police. Officers immediately began a search and searched the area that Vanessa's route approximately followed first. At 8:20 p.m., a police dog picked up the trail and led the search team to an area of dense vegetation, about 60 yards from the road and less than a mile from Rosanna Marcotte's home. The body of a woman was discovered and quickly identified. The victim turned out to be Vanessa Marcotte. A preliminary examination of the body left detectives in no doubt that Vanessa's death was criminal in nature. Her body was stripped of her clothes and there were some burn marks on her legs, hands, and face. As evident, the place where the body was found is quite secluded. There are no houses, just the road and the woods on either side of it. Vanessa's cell phone and headphones were also missing. Police thoroughly searched the entire surrounding area but could not find any of these items. Investigators believed the perpetrator had deliberately taken them because they might have left traces of his DNA on them. A sneaker with traces of fire was lying on the grass next to the body. Traces of fire were also found in other locations. Detectives concluded that the perpetrator used gasoline to try to destroy traces of his DNA. Forensic experts determined that the cause of Vanessa's death was strangulation. She fought for her life, and as a result, DNA from an unknown person was found under her fingernails. The fact that Vanessa's clothes had been taken off made the motive of the crime clear. To be brief, the medical examiners found evidence of male contact. The DNA samples were tested, but no matches were found in either the local or national databases. For the small town of Princeton, with a population of less than 4,000 people, this type of crime was completely uncommon, and therefore shocked the entire local population. Authorities asked residents of Princeton and all surrounding areas to be vigilant and cautious, and asked anyone who saw anything suspicious to report it to the Massachusetts State Hotline or the Princeton Police Department. Worcester District Attorney Joseph Early Jr. confirmed at a press conference on August 11th that the perpetrator was probably male and had received minor cuts, bruises, and scratches during the struggle with Vanessa before her death. What happened to Vanessa came as a shock not only to her family and Princeton residents, but also to her co-workers. A Google representative said, "Vanessa Marcotte was a much-loved member of the Google team, working in our New York office for the last year and a half and known for her ubiquitous smile, passion for volunteer work, and love of Boston sports. We are deeply shocked and saddened, and our thoughts are with her family and friends. Her alma mater paid tribute to her as well. We're so terribly sad for her family and friends," said Colin Riley, the executive director of media relations at Boston University. "They're in our thoughts and prayers." Police initially considered a possible connection between Vanessa Marcotte's death and an incident a few days earlier in New York City involving another runner, Karina Vetrano. On August 2, 2016, in the late afternoon, Vetrano went for a run in Spring Creek Park in Queens, less than a block from her home. She ran alone despite her father's concerns. She was last seen alive after 5 p.m., just before she entered the park. After she failed to respond to repeated calls and text messages, Vetrano's father notified a neighbor, the police chief of the New York City Police Department, who began a search. Around 11 p.m., her father found her body face down about 15 feet from the trail. As in the case of Vanessa Marcotte, Karina Vetrano's body was exposed, and the cause of her death was also strangulation. Despite the similarities between the two cases, investigators did not think there was a connection between them. 6 months later, 20-year-old Brooklyn resident Chanel Lewis was arrested by police after his DNA was matched to the one found on Karina Vetrano's body. On April 23, 2019, Lewis was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. But who was responsible for Vanessa Marcotte's death? According to investigators, the person who took Vanessa's life either lived in or frequented Princeton, and most likely knew the area well. Detectives also believe that Vanessa Marcotte did not know the perpetrator and that their paths crossed accidentally. In the meantime, law enforcement once again sought help from the public, for whom separate 24-hour phone lines had been set up. Eventually, an eyewitness reported seeing Vanessa stop outside a local convenience store for a drink of water after 1 p.m. on August 7th and was last seen walking and talking on her cell phone. Investigators believe the attack on Vanessa occurred within the next 2 hours from the time she was seen outside the store. Her phone was turned off at 2:11 p.m. and has not been turned on since. Police officers were receiving and checking many clues, searching the area where the body was found several times as well as the surrounding area, but it was not yielding the desired results. It was not until 3 months later that the police had more information about the case. A new witness said that on August 7th, he had twice seen a dark-colored Ford SUV parked on the curb near where Vanessa's body had been found, with the hood up. Outside, it was the driver, a man between the ages of 25 and 35, and who looked Hispanic. The first time the witness drove by the SUV was about 12:45 p.m. At that time, the driver was standing next to his vehicle and talking on the phone, and the second time the witness drove past the same location at approximately 2:05 p.m. The SUV was standing in the same spot, but its hood was down and no one was visible inside or near the vehicle. Authorities began searching for a Hispanic man who owned a black SUV and allegedly lived somewhere near Princeton. On February 23, 2017, more than 6 months after Vanessa's death, Worcester County District Attorney Joseph Early Jr. released additional details of the investigation, stating that the DNA found on Vanessa's body had been sent to a lab and a profile had been created. Based on the DNA evidence and witness testimony, the suspect was believed to be a Hispanic male, between the ages of 20 and 30, of athletic build, medium height, and with short or shaved hair. It was also believed that the suspect either owned or had access to a dark-colored SUV on the day of the crime and must have had visible upper body injuries within days of the attack. About 3 weeks later, a police officer patrolling the streets of Worcester County saw a man who matched the description of the suspect. This man was driving a vehicle identical to the one seen the day Vanessa Marcotte died. The police officer quickly wrote down the license plate number on his hand. After finding out the identity of the owner of the car, the police team went to the house where he lived. That man was the 31-year-old Angelo Colon Ortiz. Colon Ortiz, a Puerto Rican native who had no criminal history, was married with 3 children and had lived in Worcester for less than a year. He worked for a third-party contractor of FedEx, made deliveries in, and was familiar with the town of Princeton and surrounding areas. According to his Worcester neighbors, Colon Ortiz was described as perverted and often made vulgar comments to people in the neighborhood. A former female Princeton postal worker also said that Colon Ortiz often made crude comments in Spanish about her and other women to his coworker. When the police asked Angelo about Vanessa Marcotte, He stated that he did not know her. Furthermore, he could not recall if he was in Princeton on the day of the attack on Vanessa. He was asked to provide a sample of his DNA, and he agreed, signing documents indicating that he agreed to provide his DNA for analysis. It took some time for the lab to run the test, which showed that Colin Ortiz's DNA matched the one found under Vanessa Marcotte's fingernails. On April 15, 2017, the man was arrested and charged 3 days later. Prosecutors alleged that on the day of the crime, Colin Ortiz bought $5 worth of gasoline from a store 6 miles from the scene, and that the purchase itself was made at 2:35 p.m. This meant that by that time, Vanessa was already dead, and the man returned to the scene to try to destroy the evidence, namely his DNA on Vanessa's body. The district attorney argued that the DNA evidence was obtained through all the proper procedures that helped bring the charges. However, Colin Ortiz's attorneys claimed that their client's DNA sample was taken in an irregular manner. They cited that the language barrier prevented their client from fully understanding that he was not required to provide the police with a sample of his DNA, and Colin Ortiz stated that he did not know that he could have refused to provide one. In an affidavit in support of the motion to suppress, Colin Ortiz wrote that while he is a United States citizen, he was born in Puerto Rico and he does not speak, read, or understand English. Colin Ortiz wrote that on March 16, 2017, 2 big white officers from the state police went to my residence with someone else who spoke a version of Spanish that was strange to me. The trial dragged on for years, but eventually, on January 11, 2022, Judge Janet Kenton Walker denied the defense's motion to suppress the DNA evidence. Colin Ortiz did not plead guilty to the charge of taking a life of the first degree, but in a plea bargain, he pleaded guilty to deprivation of life of the second degree, a charge that carries a shorter sentence. He also pleaded guilty to the robbery charge, which carried a sentence of 20 years in prison. Prosecutors said Marcotte's family agreed to the plea bargain to spare themselves a harsh trial. We are thankful and pleased that the trial ended the way we always wanted it to, that this man will now be in a place where he cannot hurt anyone the way he hurt Vanessa, the Marcotte family said in a statement released by the district attorney's office. Let's keep this monster off the streets. I'll be dead long before he gets a parole hearing, Vanessa Marcotte's father said. Angelo Colin Ortiz, 36, was sentenced to life in prison in October 2022. He will serve 20 years on the robbery charge and then begin serving a life sentence, which includes a minimum of 25 years before being eligible for parole. That would make it at least 45 years in prison before parole eligibility.